Survivor and slog through the nadir. Then season 40's awesomeness will make you wanna cheer. We're all just so excited to watch these winners play. But we're still lazy, so this podcast comes out on Friday. John will make some dumb jokes, and he likes to yell and scream. But now we're watching 20 winners play, and it feels like a dream. We'll spend the whole time freaking out and judging the best move. And anything that Tony does, you know that we'll approve. It's the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast. Winners at War!
Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor Podcast. I am John. My co-host is Andy. And legitimately, that is my only co-host this week. There is absolutely no one else joining us as we talk Episode 8, Survivor, Winners at War, where it seems like we might have found our footing, Andy. We might be on the yellow brick road to success.
Yeah, I mean, we had to get rid of those other co-hosts because what downers they were, right? Like, this is a fantastic season, and all they could do was complain and concern troll, and there just was no time for that.
As I've said all season long, this season is great. It's going 100% how I wanted it to play out, and I am optimistic as hell.
Nothing to worry about. The state of the franchise is strong, and everything's great. Like, that's what we've been trying to say. But those other people that we brought on really took it to a dark place.
And you hate that. You hate to see people try to drag this show down. And clearly, it's delivering. And, you know, it's nice to be democratic, include a lot of other voices, but at the same time, we should just listen to the voices that have been correct all along, which is ours.
Yeah, no, I liked this week's episode. It was, a good amount of fun, some tension early, and then no tension late. Not at all, because everything looked great.
Yeah, and so I will admit, I was a little clenched all the way up until we got to Tribal Council, but once we hit that moment, I was good.
Yeah, like, for how long were you just waiting for another shoe to drop and, like, when the targets were being named? It's like, no, you can't do this to me. No, I'm not gonna fall for it, because, until now, it was difficult to figure out what was the best episode so far as the season. Was it the one where they teased that an also-ran winner was gonna go home, only for it to be a legend? Or was it the other ones that did that? So I was, again, I was like, sure, yeah, tell me it's Adam. Yeah, sure, tell me it's Nick. Okay, yeah, I believe you that Wendell. They're gonna vote out Tyson or something. Like, that was how it was. But at the same time, it's like, when they went to Tribal Council, it's like, it really feels like it's gonna be one of those three. Well, this should be nice.
Yeah, once we'd heard 3 names, none of them being targets that I was concerned with, and then Tribal Council started. At that point, I was like, all right, well, you've named 3. You're not gonna randomly swerve into a 4th unnamed vote.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there'd be time. Nobody seems to be talking about that. And that's what I liked. It was that what we've been asking for, and not just since the beginning of this season, not just throughout the pre-merge, frankly, for a few seasons now, is the people that tend to get targeted in the middle and now early middle portion of the game to be like, hey, let's not help people with that. Let's instead vote out these other people. And that's what we got to see.
Yeah, and I was a little worried because this is why I felt pretty, confident that Adam wasn't going home. Jeremy spelled it out. Adam is the guy that they're not going to take out, and he's just going to skate along, and he's going to screw everything up later. And I'm like, damn it, he's 100% right. Listen to Jeremy. And so I was convinced it wasn't Adam. And at that point, I'm like, well, I guess it has to be Wendell, because Wendell and Nick were the 2 other names given, but it didn't seem like a lot of consideration was given to Nick. It was mostly Wendell.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy and Ben certainly wanted to vote out Nick for, a few specific reasons. One we're going to get into. But yeah, no, I'd love to hear that more people than just like Tyson or just Tony were talking about that. This is a real thing, that we big targets need to team up together. And how did you like that Ben was the one saying we big targets?
Some people might think that I didn't enjoy that because that's ridiculous. Why would Ben be lumping himself in with that group? But no, I think I was pretty clear. I'm thinking we even discussed this in a preseason podcast that we want people like Ben and Sarah to think that they are these big targets. Although I think Sarah might actually be one now. I think she might have proven herself to be one, but still, Ben, we want him to think that he's the big target so that he then lumps himself in with the people that we want to protect and thus protects them. That's what I want to see out of Ben, and that's what I feel like we finally got this episode.
Yeah, honestly, that's a part of what was missing out of the pre-merge for me. It's just like, where's your ego? Where's your sense of belief in yourself? And like, we saw it with Wendell here when, he was talking about his plans, like, I need, and talking about like Denise's new, race profile a bit. It's like, I need to get all these big threats out of the game. That's what I need to do. And it's just like, if it would just be, I'm here to take out the old schoolers because I'm going to show that I'm better than them. Then I'd be like, yes, do it. I go off. I'm here for that. But what it feels like, and what it kept feeling like is, I need to get these old schoolers, these legends out because I know they're better than me. And it's just like, no, I want ego. You guys are all winners too. You shouldn't have to resort to this, scared tactic of, who's the next better player? Who's better than me? The only way I can win is if none of them are around. It's like, how about you just try being better than them? So yes, I like Ben, having, the self-belief to include himself as part of that group. And here's an extra step that, I feel that I don't know, I haven't really seen expressed anywhere. Ben actually is a threat at this stage in the game. The only other time Ben has played, a whole bunch of people wanted to get him out for ever, but they couldn't because he kept finding idols. And at this stage in the game, even if you feel rightly in many cases that you're a better player than Ben, it doesn't matter if you can't vote him out. So the threat level he poses is that he could keep finding idols and majorly disrupt your plans. Too many people, I think, start to think of who's a threat in terms of who's a threat to beat me in front of the jury. But you gotta get there first.
And you might have noticed that these people that are all having the big targets, big threats conversation, they had a common characteristic. I'm not sure if you picked up on it or not.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably just a coincidence that they were all dudes, right?
Probably a total coincidence. How the fuck are Kim and Sarah not big targets? How are they not looped into those conversations? Although, to be fair, Sophie was clearly talked to, Denise was clearly talked to, but they weren't named as the big targets.
Yeah, it felt like it was Ben in the conversations with Ben that was, amongst the guys, right? And Ben was the one listing the targets. And then somebody like Tyson was agreeing with him because it's like, yeah, you're speaking my language. I'm not going to sell past the close. And I'll say this. Do we think Ben has seen Survivor One World? Because, it's not 100% that he has. And that's not even a dig on Ben. That wasn't a great time to be watching Survivor. I think there's actually a lot of fans that haven't seen those seasons. And who knows, maybe he was overseas or something. But, that's one way how you would know that Kim is great. But, I think there's also the other thing of hey, I am defining Big Target in a very specific way. But, Jeremy wasn't, he was echoing Ben's thoughts, but he wasn't, forwarding that because we've seen Jeremy and Tony have this conversation when they're including Sandra and Kim. And then, puffing up Denise to be that. Ben did mention when he was talking about the threats in the confessional, he was, at least aware enough to mention Sandra and Parvati, but, that doesn't take a big stretch.
Yeah, exactly. The two names that should be on the Mount Rushmore of Survivor, not a big leap to suggest that they might be big targets. Although they currently can't be.
Nope.
One of them potentially could be in the future, but isn't right now. So, I did find it very funny too that Jeremy just tried to lump Wendell in as a shield. And it's I know that's your game and that's your buzzwordy strategy that you use, but you're getting a little too loose with that term, buddy. Wendell's not really a shield. You're really stretching the bounds of the definition of shield there.
Yeah. Now, of the also-rans, Wendell probably came into the season with the highest profile.
Sure.
But Yeah, and there's something to that he ended up being the one that went, like they finally targeted some lows, but it still is like, yeah, but we can't get it too low, right? Like, and we'll get into that and, why it ended up being Wendell. But yeah, I know, it's like, you were trying, Jeremy. I believe, people saw through you. We know, in fact, at least one person saw through you. But, it's Wendell, it really...
Do you think that they didn't want to take out the lowest of the lower tier winners because it just would have been unsporting of them?
No, I do think it was a Jeremy and Wendell thing. And we can talk about that now. Just one thing, because like, they were right, I should say. Like, Sophie with that, observation that like Jeremy is trying to bring Wendell in and, their buddy. They were right. And it could totally be about like the different vibes. We saw people talk about that preseason. But, this is a little uncomfortable to be like, Jeremy and Wendell must be working together.
Yeah, I didn't get that implication, but it definitely could be. I think it was all in the messenger, and I don't think that Sophie was sending that message. But she did freaking nail it, that like, Jeremy and Wendell are just too close, and too outwardly close, to the point that Tony was like, you think? First of all, I think Tony was probably very fucking flexible with this vote and was going to go wherever, any name that wasn't Tony, he was going for it. Like, he was doing the Sandra strategy here. Like, cool, heat's off me. I just want to survive for a little while.
Yeah, actually, I've been really impressed with what Tony did this episode, including when, Ben and Jeremy and Tyson are all talking like, they are the targets. He would be quick to be like, no, lower profile.
Yeah.
He didn't call them like lesser players, and in confessional, he gave them their credit. And like, that is very important. This is how those players succeed and continue to along in the game until they thrive, is that people think of them as lesser. And that's not the case. They just are lower profile, but their danger and the threat they pose is significant. In some ways more significant than the obvious threat. So, I like that Tony, had a good sense of it and was able to, talk people down at least a little bit while still pursuing, the big target philosophy that, he should be.
Right. And props to Sophie, because she is the architect of the plan to get out Wendell. At least that we saw. I'm sure there were other voices that were suggesting the same thing. Another thing that I loved, since we're complimenting the ladies that were in charge here, Jeremy approaching Denise and saying, hey, if we're not getting rid of Wendell, how do you feel about Adam? And Denise just freaking cold-blooded, yeah, I'm good. Let's get Adam. It's fine. Like, yes, Denise, that's the killer instinct I wanted to see. I loved it so much.
Yeah, no, she's awesome. Continues to be awesome. And yes, of course, we're not going to complain about anybody suggesting they'd be willing to vote out Adam, whether it'll actually ever happen or not. I still have some doubts, but, that was a good move by her. And yeah, like, we don't know for sure. Obviously, moves often have more than one author, but absolutely credit to Sophie. Her observation that she was sharing both, in the moment to, I think it was Sarah, but also, with us, was right. Jeremy was trying to groom Wendell, and it should be noted that, like, Sophie isn't aligned with Jeremy at all. They've never met, to the best of my knowledge. So it's not just that she views like Jeremy trying to like go around like the alliance or whatever it is, because that's not really a thing. It's like, hey, how is Jeremy getting in here and also trying to pick the person? So she did a really good job of putting it into that, because Jeremy absolutely did not want to get rid of Wendell, and nor should he. Somebody who can work with you is a valuable asset. But she wasn't going to let that happen. And, so she couldn't control the vote towards voting out a more dangerous target, a higher profile target, which I believe is the way she wants to play. And I'll get into that more in a bit. But she was able to do the next best thing. If the vote is going to be driven by, this big target alliance or whatever, she found a way that it didn't further benefit them in the way that, like, getting rid of Nick or Adam.
I mean, it even, as she noted, kneecaps Jeremy, because Wendell was going to be part of Jeremy's strategy. And she's like, okay, well, if you're correct that she's wanting to go at those big targets, if now is not the time to make that move, at least eliminate their potential power that they might be able to use later on by getting rid of a potential vote on their side. So again, props all around. Sophie killed it this episode. That was excellent strategy.
Yeah, no, and the reason why I think that this is her strategy of getting out big targets is when we get back from when we were watching the Merge Fest, Feast Fest,
both.
Whatever. It's probably Feast
Lobster Fest.
That's something. Denise is telling how she got rid of Sandra. I loved people's reaction. Ben is just like a gape, like, "Oh my god, no way!" Adam, bug-eyed mouth, dragging.
No, that's just Adam's look.
Yeah, that's right. He was confused about something. Sophie's reaction, in the moment, she, again, reacted appropriately. But for a confessional was, am I the only person thinking that, she's the only person now with a resume and we need to target her? Like, that pretty much seems to define what she wants to do. And, this is why, like last week, when we were talking about how it's distressing that it seems like all that happens on Survivor is you prove yourself good at it, and that is a bad thing for your game. People were like, no, you're overreacting. And I mean, that couldn't have happened. Us overreact? No. All these awesome people are still in here. Sophie could win. It's like, yeah, no, Sophie could win. She's playing really well. And if you're a fan of Sophie, that will be lots of fun for you. I like Sophie. I was rooting for her in South Pacific. I was, disappointed that she didn't make Game Changers. I was happy she made this season. But I don't think she will necessarily play the game that I was hoping for, the game that I was talking about, the game that, I worry is not possible for Survivor. And even after this week, I'm not saying that it's totally, everything's okay because one vote went, took out Wendell. It's right there. When Denise is saying that, her reaction is, well, now I gotta get rid of Denise. So I think, definitionally, I think, right now, who knows if that'll be the way the rest of the season goes, I think Sophie's very much wants to play the game of make sure bigger targets than me are constantly being taken out until I'm the highest profile player left, which could be a very successful strategy. We never said it wasn't going to be a successful strategy, but it is, a less interesting one for me.
Potentially. Weirdly, she and Wendell both came to kind of the same conclusion. Like, Denise has clearly established herself as a gamer. We need to take her out. But Sophie's was much more in the matter of like, I need to take her out. However, other priorities will come first. And I think that if her longer term strategy is allow some people to build up resumes so that when you take them out later on, you are then developing your own resume, that could potentially be a fun watch.
Yeah, and this episode revealed her to be, doing things, right? And that's I want people to do things. I hate the idea that Survivor is a game that discourages doing things. But I'll challenge, however, no, I don't got any sense that she said, however, I'll do that later. She couldn't do it this week because Denise was immune. And again, maybe, if Sophie in her perfect world, maybe she wouldn't have taken out Denise this week because she would have taken out, Tyson or Tony or something. But, we have no proof that she has, however, or, I'll wait to get rid of those big threats. She had to wait this week because the tides weren't that way. And what she was able to do is take out the biggest threat amongst the lesser targets that people were choosing. I feel like Wendell is a bigger threat than Adam or Nick. It's not the highest bar in the world to clear, but I think she got there. And, I still think that is a game that I think she would feel comfortable playing because I think it was one that would benefit her.
Potentially. I mean, obviously she couldn't have gone after Denise this week. My read on it was that she needs to take Denise out, but it wasn't an emergent need to take Denise out. Maybe it would have been. We don't have any idea because she couldn't enact such a plan. But at the same time, I got that as more of a long-term, I need to make sure Denise is not getting to the end thing.
Yeah, and look, she should make sure most people don't get to the end but herself would be the goal. Again, I don't criticize any of this from a personal player's perspective. Sophie's job here is to win $2 million. It's just when you come at me this'll be awesome if Sophie will be out there slaying. It's again, if she's out there slaying because she's doing awesome things and outmaneuvering people like this week, yes, on board. If she's out there doing it by making sure nobody sees her as a target at all until she's up against Michele and Adam in the finale,
there you go.
then okay, that's the exact thing I've been complaining about. And, again, you're a fan of Sophie, and I can't say that I'm a fan of Sophie because I am not on the level of the Sophie fans that have been rightfully enjoying their time this season. It'll be fun for you. You won't care, man. Sophie won. That's all that's important. But for me, I want Survivor to be something more than that, and I worry that it won't be. But not after this week. I mean, they took out Wendell instead of Tyson.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, and I want to be clear, like, I'm not leading the Sophie bandwagon. I just am recognizing a well-played game this week.
Yep. I agreed. I want people to make sure that's the takeaway, that none of this is a criticism of their game, just like none of it was a criticism of games last week.
And more importantly, I am leaving the door open on a criticism of Sophie. If she starts to play poorly, I will be like, damn it, Sophie, you've let me down. At the same time, if she starts getting active and making big moves, I'm going to be like, fuck yeah, Sophie! This is the one I've wanted all along. Like, just because I am judging her in a given week does not mean that that is my overarching view of Sophie as a Survivor player.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, it doesn't even have to be big moves. It could be like this week where she, behind the scenes, was able to switch a vote. Because it wasn't Wendell, it was Nick. And then, when it didn't feel like it could be Nick because of the counteraction by Sophie and possibly others, but it was credited to her. And that's the only source of truth we have. One that we know is completely untruthful. Then suddenly it might be Adam. And then it still finishes Wendell. If that sort of thing, even if it's behind the scenes, but we get to be part of some of that behind the scenes of her manipulating votes and all that while never doing quote unquote big moves, that would impress me too. But if it's just, and she hasn't been doing this season, but I don't think she'd mind if it's, let's just keep voting out targets until, hey, I'm better than these schmucks. Well, that won't be interesting for me, even if she's awesome otherwise.
And who survives in that sort of a strategy?
I mean, the other people we've been talking about, for sure.
Adam, for sure, because as I predicted, it seems 100% that Adam is a 0 vote finalist at this point. Like, it's going to happen because Survivor hates me, despite how much I love this show. It seems inevitable at this point, right? You on board with this?
I'm not there at 100%. Like, they were clowning Stephen Fishback a lot, and he didn't make it to the end. He didn't really come particularly close in the grand scheme of things. There's still time for Adam to, fail in a spectacular way before he goes. If I had to put money on it, however, he feels so much like the 0 vote finalist. I don't know that he's going anywhere. And, I don't hate, people need to know, I do not hate Adam. What's to hate? It's just it's more, a lot of what he symbolizes. It's just this, innocuous brand of new Survivor. Part of it is that he's, this sweet, earnest kid, and I'm like, miss me with that. He's been kind of funny, obviously at his expense more than, intentionally. Well, I'll give one note of credit. I think his, vote out line of, I know it's either me or you. Do you? That ended up being pretty slick. It would have been more hilarious if it ended up being Nick, in the way that he could end up not, being okay for him, but still being completely wrong, much like last week with the idol hunt. But, it wasn't. And, that wasn't a decent line. Like, he knows a few things, but, seeing him, grasping at everything, and this episode was no different for that. It has some form of amusement.
Yeah, I think you're pretty close to my assessment of Adam, which is that just watching his game, and it's nothing against him as a person, but watching his game, it is exactly that sort of game that you were talking about, where it's just float along, do very little that's interesting or fun or entertaining, and then make it to the end with people who are somehow less than you. Like, I don't know that that's even possible for him this season, but at the same time, if all you're doing is hiding while everybody takes out big threats, that's not an interesting game to me. And he is the personification of that for me. And I think that's what drives this like visceral anti-Adam sentiment that I have. Nothing about the person in particular, just what he represents as a Survivor player just really angers me.
Yeah, no, it's why, like, people try to point to the scoreboard of, like, who's still around and who isn't and how many days or whatever, like, as a representation is the dumbest metric you can possibly point to in Survivor. Like, if you're not just being partisan in favor or against a particular person, you recognize that plenty of people make it in Survivor a long time, not because they are good, but actually the exact opposite. And, you know, I will say in MVGX, it wasn't necessarily the case with him. He was fine. But this season, if he makes it to the end, it will be because everybody there is determined, wow, there's actually a GOAT in an all-winner season. Like, people in comments were asking, like, who could Adam beat at this point? And, you know, I made the joke that Adam would lose to two other Adams in this season. Like, it's just, and obviously so much of that is influenced by edit, but, you know, like, we see the way that people are treating him. Like, Ben has no time for him. It's actually almost a little mean, the way Ben was.
So not only did Ben have no time for him, but Nick then goes in and says, like, well, everybody who talks to Adam says you can't trust him and he's not worth working with. And it's like, damn, even the lowest tier is like, yeah, but not Adam, though.
Yeah, when Nick is getting dunks off of you. And like, I think Nick hasn't met him. Maybe probably outside of the game. They probably have the recent-ish winners. But like, that is secondhand. So if you want, you know, oh, you're just being biased against Adam, like, Nick heard that from people who played with Adam, which will give you an idea of people's perception of Adam. Because I'm not there, but I heard people say some things that heard people say some things. Yeah, no, I mean, now I'm at the point where it's like, hey, Adam's a target. It's like, all right, what else you got? I don't believe you. He'll need to like screw up another big time for people to be like, he did it again. We have to get rid of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't be fooled at this point. And do you know who else could not be fooled last week? Our boy Matt, who is currently, probably, depending on when you're listening to this, sitting in a hospital. So get well soon, Matt. But Matt correctly called that getting rid of Yul was a mistake for Michele and Nick, who didn't seem to have connections to lean on in this episode. There was no Yul partnership with Sophie and Sarah that they could lean on. None of that. They were on an island. Michele, Nick, and Wendell were the only people not clued in on this vote. How'd that work out for you guys?
Yeah, that was fantastic. And, we took some flack. The collective we, even though it was really just one of us, of like criticize, like Matt was the only one to criticize the choice to vote out Yul. You and I were just like, it sucks that that's the obvious choice always. I mean, obviously Wendell, did the right thing in voting out Yul, yes. Even though he's the one who went home this week because Yul was trying to vote out him. But no, they should have voted out Wendell, and now they would have people to work with. Instead, nothing, man. Presumably at some point, Michele might be able to work with Jeremy again, but I don't know how she fits in his current strategy at all. But Nick...
Yeah, where's he going? I think this probably worked out well for us, because, as viewers, because suppose Yul is still in. If then Yul, Michele, and Nick somehow do end up working with Sarah and Sophie and they start taking out those big targets instead, that's much worse as an entertainment product. So, in hindsight, bravo for taking out Yul last week.
Yeah, but that scenario is just kind of like what I was talking about with the Sophie fans. I'd be okay because I love Yul, right? So it might be like a counter effect of like the kind of Survivor I'd like to see played. And to qualify, I get that big targets have always been targeted in Survivor. Thank you for the people who've pointed that out. I am aware. What it used to be is that they weren't targeted so early. And it's an ecosystem thing. When you take down, the apex predator in an ecosystem, now suddenly the next tier, of level it hurts them because, their numbers start to get oversaturated and then suddenly it's just kind of, the bottom feeders that, there's so many because nobody's killing them anymore. And that's kind of what's happened with Survivor. So the threats that used to get taken out around the merge, which also used to be later, has started to be taken out even earlier than the merge because of swaps, maybe even before a swap because people know a swap's coming. And then at this phase in the game, the second tiers were taken out, and then the bottom feeders what were left. That's what I was talking about. But that doesn't happen this episode. It's not going to happen all season. We have hope.
Yes, because Matt's prediction will remain infallible, and now the former Red Tribe players will align with Sophie and Sarah and run roughshod over the rest of the game. Bravo, Matt, for correctly calling that. And if he's wrong, we can all blame it on Matt.
Yeah, real quick, because you just kind of glossed over the fact he's in the hospital. It's a day surgery. He should be fine. It's not the thing that you were probably instantly afraid that it was.
Yeah, I guess
at least not yet.
Hey, well, don't jinx it, Andy.
Getting back to a few of the other things in the episode, do you think Jeremy went too far in trying to save Wendell?
Yeah, I think he tried to expend a little too much capital. To his credit, though, he did end up backing off and clearly sided with the people who were voting out Wendell. But at the same time, even trying to sell Wendell as a person to keep, he pushed a little hard with Ben and a couple of the others. More importantly, he totally put his foot in his mouth when he said, Wendell's good for our game. He did one of those and it was like, oh shit, that's not the slip you want to make. So it did seem like he could have convinced people, but if you have to convince that many people, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I'll say the immunity necklace gives him cover to do so, because clearly it can't flip around him on here. And, the worry is the long-term damage. Well, what's the long-term damage? Wendell's gone. What are you worried? It's not like people could be like, well, now we have to be worried about Wendell teaming up with Jeremy or Jeremy. It's like, but we took care of that. And one thing that happens to Survivor is that people's focus just keeps shifting left and right. So I'm not too worried about the long-term damage. The ultimate goal for Jeremy is still well in place. Certain people starting to think about themselves and what they need to do to advance. The bigger thing will be, and frankly, losing Wendell was probably a big advantage for that, because now people know he's more committed to this unless he starts trying to groom Michele as his, alliance partner.
And you know what? When he had Fishback back in Cambodia, that was clearly his ride or die. At least Fishback was ride or die with him. I don't know that it was the other way around. But then, he lost him and was totally able to reform his game and center it around other people, make solid alliances there. So it's not like he can't come back from this.
Yeah.
I just think he probably pushed too hard to save someone at this vote.
Yeah, for me, it's you could try a bit. And maybe that's my whole thing. I want people to try a bit. And as you say, he didn't in the end. Unless, you're our commenter, Jersey Luck, who, in the moment, I'm hoping in the broad light of daylight, they've come around, was trying to convince people in comments that Jeremy actually didn't vote for Wendell. That was totally Michele who knew. And, bravo. From one partisan to another, I get it, but there's no way Michele knew what was going on. I love the beautiful fiction that was created. That's she was just playing it up for Nick. What value would that have? I must ask. Sure, everybody else in the game, including the jury, thinks you're on the other side and a moron here for voting, not with the group. But you've got Nick on your side who has no value to you, so you're good there. Mike, shout out to the Kween Michele, one of the greats, playing one of the best games of this season, social player, connections you would not believe, for twice now not knowing what was happening at a tribal council.
She is a social queen, not a strategic queen, all right? And more importantly, she got rid of Wendell without blood on her hands. That's a big thing that juries are very interested in at this point in this season, or in the game, 40 seasons in.
Yes, she definitely got rid of him by, not knowing that people were getting rid of him. But, she got her coin back, so at least there's that. But, hey, also, that the segment where they talk about how Nick just keeps butting into conversations, that was art.
It was, I loved the framing to have like Nick pop in from either side of the various scenes they were cutting to. Like you knew he was going to be coming in. You just didn't know which side of the screen. And they're either like he would pop in or the camera would pan back and then Nick would arrive, or just even later on, there's a beat and then Jeremy and Ben are later talking strategy and Nick just wanders by to get water. And like the continuing thread a few seconds later was great.
It was so brilliant. I wonder like what order this happened in. Did the editors, put that together, finding the footage, pulling back? Or after, several people were talking about how Nick butts in all the time, was like production, the message to send everybody, all right, I need you guys to start getting this. Footage. Start framing it this way. Yeah, this is what I need from you. Maybe a bit of both. Both things can be true. But it was so hilarious. Like, the best part of the episode.
It was great. Less great, the fire token menu that's in the game, at least according to you. I don't know that I necessarily agree with this.
What a pile of bullshit it is. Like, now, finally things get real. And look, it was only on screen for a second or so people might have missed it, but this is what they added to the fabled, fire token menu. The one in game with the one at, Edge of Extinction is different. Maybe different than what we saw before. We don't know what it's going to be going forward. It will cost 3 fire tokens to steal someone's spot on a reward. That is an advantage that we spent half a season insulting Adam for believing was a good one. Which he ended up giving it to Jay. Jay, to his credit, actually used it pretty well, and that he stole somebody's reward, but then took them on the reward. So it was just a kind of a way to get himself the reward without denying anybody. But still, I don't think that's a great thing. The other one you can get is 2 fire tokens to send a message to someone on the edge. What the fuck would that do?
See, this is where I know that you're just not a creative person, because if I were in the game, I am absolutely dumb enough to spend those 2 fire tokens, and I would write a note to Parvati that says, read this in complete privacy. Dear Russell, this is a huge turning point in this game. And tell me that doesn't get her fucking vote when it comes jury time. Like, come on, she'd laugh her ass off at that. I would get Parvati's vote. That is worth 2 fire tokens.
I'm not sure 1 out of 16 votes is worth 2 fire tokens. It's a big jury. I mean, I said that it would be funny if Tyson was like, dear Rob, don't bother sending me anything from the Edge of Extinction. I used my fire tokens to send you this message. Because that's what fire tokens are useful for. Buying things from people of Edge Extinction. Obviously not all the players know that, but a good handful of them do at this point. And that's what you can communicate with somebody, but you can't if you spend double the cost of an immunity idol on a communication.
The best part.
You need to be so rich in fire tokens that you can send somebody, hey, by the way, at the end of this letter, I will still have a fire token. Good looking out.
The best part would be someone saying, hey, I need you to send me an idol. Don't do it yet because I used my last tokens to send you this letter, but I'm gonna need it real soon.
Like, a message the other way, like get a message from somebody from the edge, that might have some value, tell me what's going on, pal of mine who's over there. But what does it help you to communicate with people who can't do anything in the main game other than sell you things, which you might not be able to buy because you spent money sending them the message? I guess you gotta spend money to make money.
I just wish that there was someone that was a fire token billionaire that could just use this as like FU money, and like Tyson would be sending letters to Rob out there like, what's going on, buddy? Been missing you. How'd you like that last challenge? See you soon. Give Amber my love. Just send sweet little letters for no reason whatsoever. Be great.
So Michele has 4 fire tokens, so maybe she can send a note to Wendell and be like, hey, Wen, we still good. But I don't know what else she's gonna go. Here's another thing.
She could send a note to Wendell, send nudes. You think it would work?
Yeah. You'd have to build something out of reclaimed wood.
Oh, phrasing.
Oh, hey, real quick about them. Apparently, it came out in a interview with Wendell that, you know, they were exaggerating and playing up the degree of acrimony between them. First off, shout out to the commenter who, you know, pointed it out. Maybe you could be a little less rude with the thing that you are hypothesizing that has no evidence on the show, but still, you might have been right. That was worth everybody's time and trouble. Like, what a millennial position that'd be like, everybody is going to be so worried about the time we dated, kind of, but not really, that we need to come up with an extra thing. Meanwhile, like, most of this cast are, like, grown-ass adults with, like, kids and stuff. I don't know how many people knew that Wendell and Michele used to date at all, that they needed to, like, I think everybody that they came up to with this, oh, it's so awkward here, were like, oh, you two used to be a thing, huh? Like, I think...
Really? You two?
Like, I don't know that Parvati or Yule really knew about those things, because I don't think they cared.
Yeah, and count me in, because I am a big Survivor fan and had no clue, and also didn't care even when I did find out.
Yeah. So, you know, there you go. Anybody wants you know, and also, like, people were complaining that we didn't get, like, an end to that story here. It's hard to wrap up a story, with, you know, the end being the elimination of Wendell when the participants in it are not aware that it's going to end up in the elimination of Wendell. Why did we not get Michele reacting to it? Because Michele thought that Adam was going home. That's why. But yeah, there's always next week when she sends him a note. The other thing that's a problem with the new fire token menu that I think you'll actually, now you're going to be on my side that this thing is just an abomination. They took off coffee in Danish. You can no longer buy that.
Why? What even is the point?
Yeah, that was like, so yeah, Michele has 4 fire tokens, Nick has 3, so it's like, oh, they're out for revenge, it's not so bad. But they're gonna buy themselves a bunch of beans? Like, it's not like...
Maybe they're magic beans.
Maybe. Hey, speaking of the edge, who let out a bigger primal scream at the end of the return challenge, Tyson or you?
Can't it be both?
It could be two things.
So, were you rooting for Rob there? I know you said last week that you didn't think he stood a chance if he came back into the game right now. Like, the odds were just too stacked against him. But did you, like, in the moment of that challenge, did you at least break down and be like, I just want it for old time's sake?
So, there's a couple complicating factors. Yeah, for one, like, leading up to the episode, I would think, because there's a very real possibility that Rob would win. He is statistically one of the best challenge performers in the history of Survivor. And that's not partisan me. That's, you know,
partisan True Dork Times, the fake news media.
Yes, exactly. He's put out the stats. Now, look, he's a much older Rob than the guy who accumulated those stats, but they're still that. And I knew at the time that he had access to 3 fire tokens, which I also knew that you could buy at multiple advantages in the challenges. So it's like, yeah, he has a very good chance of kiting in. Is that good for him is the thing I couldn't figure out, because yeah, I think people would just turn around and vote him out again. And at the time I was like, maybe it would be better to hang on to the fire tokens and try to win the last challenge. Now, as it turns out, that's not an option. Probst came out with his interview with Dalton Ross this morning saying that all the tokens had to be spent and they're all gone. If you hadn't spent them, they don't continue on to the next part of the game, nor does Natalie or Rob's, you know, idols that they bought. So from that, like, I was a little bit like, is it that great to come in? Now, ultimately, I think being in the game is better than not being in the game. You still have a better chance of, you know, progressing when you're in it than when you're not. And if you get voted out again, well, then he has another shot to come back like that. It doesn't really change from that perspective of, like, waiting or not when you can't hold on to tokens. The other complicating factor is I have 2 Twitter accounts. One is just for Survivor. One is, you know, regular me. I used to be able to just go on the regular one and not get any Survivor stuff while it's airing. I don't follow anybody that, you know, I know follows Survivor. Now, this season is drawing a few more people in, and the fact also that there's, like, no sports or anything is drawing more people in. Tyson was trending. So I was like, I bet Tyson wins. Now, I was like, hey, maybe Mike Tyson just caught, you know, coronavirus or something, right? Like, there's other reasons why it could be Tyson, but as I was watching, it was like, I kind of feel like Tyson's going to win, but ultimately, yeah, I was rooting for Rob. Like, in my heart of hearts, as it was happening, it was like, man, it'd be cool for Rob to win. How about yourself?
Obviously, this is one of those things where we've talked about multiple times over the season, like tests of your fandom. Tyson is, for me, a player I'm much more interested in than Rob. But at the same time, it was a lot like the tribal council thing, where once we went to tribal council with like the 3 potential targets, I was like, okay, it's one of those 3. I can breathe easy. Once it got down to Tyson versus Rob, and it seemed like those were the only 2 options that stood a chance, I was like, okay, I can breathe easy. I'd prefer it be Tyson, but at the same time, I was totally fine if it was going to be Rob. Especially because Rob had bought that idol, which I think he definitely would have needed had he returned to the game.
Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of, for me, it's like, in the moment, while figuring it was probably Tyson due to that, and I know now I just can't go on Twitter during, until I watch Survivor, which, that's probably a positive thing. Twitter is a hellscape. I shouldn't be there. But, in the moment, I wanted to be Rob, but, I wasn't crushingly disappointed that it wasn't. Sorry to all those that wish I was. I think Tyson has a better chance. We've already seen it of progressing, through the game. I don't know. Will he make it to, by the time another person returns in? I don't know. But, because that's the other thing. Tyson gets voted out. He could just win again. But that would work also out, I think, for me as somebody who is invested in Rob's success. So Rob and Natalie were the only people who could do anything more than buy an advantage in the game, in the challenge. What did you think of their decision, instead of stacking 3 advantages, to buy an advantage and an idol?
In the moment, I thought that seemed odd. More so for Natalie, probably, just because with Rob, I could at least understand it. Like, you roll the dice, because if you get back into the game, you're probably going to immediately need that idol. I don't know that Natalie necessarily would have needed it right away, but someone took a screenshot of the advantages on there, and it was like the law of diminishing returns, because the additional advantages they weren't going to help enough. It wasn't worth expending fire tokens on them. Did you see what they were?
Yeah, Brad shared it with us. So the next advantage is your pole is assembled for you. Which, frankly, for some people, maybe that's not an advantage. Like, maybe you would trust your own, equipment versus borrowed tools. Yes, I realize what I'm doing here, and I'm doing it for fun.
And just to clarify, 3 sticks of your pole were built for you.
Ah, yeah, not even the whole deal. So yeah, like, that's some time. And if you believe the edit that Rob lost by a second, there's that. There's some doubt about that, this challenge actually required you to put a ball through there twice. Photo proof kind of suggests that it was the same thing last time when Rick Evans won. So it's possible that they were able to edit, one of Rob's attempts to look as close as Tyson's. I'll say the crowd certainly seemed like it was a tense finish, but, maybe anytime somebody gets that close to winning, it feels tense. And then the other advantage after that, and you had to buy them in order, it looked like, is that the key would be a little bit closer.
Right. So again, does that help? Sure. Is it worth one of your fire tokens? Probably not. I mean, if you only had 2 of them and they were going to go nowhere anyway, then yes, buy 2 advantages. Or honestly, buy an advantage and buy that fucking 5-ton vat of peanut butter that Tyson bought. Those 2 things would probably help you than a second advantage in that challenge.
Yeah, for me, getting back into the game obviously is step 1 for Rob, and it's an important step. You can't go to the end unless you get off that fucking island at some point. But an idol was really important, because as much as the threats got together and voted out, I don't think they do that if Rob is there. I think you could do that with Tyson, especially a Tyson that doesn't have a Rob, potentially in play. But I don't think you could do that with Rob. I don't even know Jeremy, the person who likes to do this and seemed to want to work with Rob for some portion of, the pre-merge. I don't know if I think he wanted to work with him for some portion of the pre-merge for this instant, for somebody else. That's what that shield is for. All right. We've expended this hit. Now let's move on to another. So yeah, it makes sense. And then, I guess the other thing is, the only reason why Rob was able to make that choice is because Amber gave him her token. What did you think of that?
Oh, that was love. Romber working as a team. I know there were some people griping like, oh, why is Amber giving up her token and not using it herself for an advantage? Look, I think Amber recognizes, like, this is Rob's thing. Like, Amber is probably just over Survivor, and I don't know how everyone else's relationship works, but in mine, if my wife is more into something than I am, then I will support her in that, and vice versa. So that's how I read it. I think that, Rob really wants to keep playing Survivor. Amber is like, you know what, honey? I support you because we're a team. You want to keep playing Survivor. I don't really care. Have my fire token.
This is what being in a partnership with someone is about, is that you figure out, like, it can, or at least it can be. You figure out each of your strengths and use them to benefit both of you.
Right.
Rob is statistically, again, I'm going to say it, much better at challenges, not only than Amber, but most people who have ever played Survivor. He, with an advantage, has an incredible chance to win. As we saw, the people sitting there will remind you that Rob's good at everything.
I figured you'd have to bring that up.
Amber is slightly above average at challenges, again, statistically. Moreover, if Amber keeps that token, she's going to get her 1 advantage. Now all Rob can do is buy 3 advantages. So Amber with 1 and Rob with 3 means that not only is she not going to beat everybody else there, she's not going to beat Rob. So the best strategy for both of them is to pool their collective resources. Now, I did see one idea that's they should have given it all to Amber, because she has a much better chance of getting to the end than Rob. And that's a fun thing to say. It's the sort of thing that sounds like, I'm the really smart Survivor observer. Unless you look at it at all. For one, you only get to have that chance to get all the way to the end if you win the challenge that gets you there. And I don't think Amber, even with those extra little advantages, is beating Tyson. I'm not sure she's beating Rob, even without any advantages. Secondly, Amber survived a grand total of 0 tribal councils this season. Rob survived more than 0. So the idea that she has a better chance of going to the end isn't really supported by evidence. People will say, well, she was only voted out because Rob was still in the game. Well, guess what? If Amber somehow managed to win this challenge, which she wasn't going to, but let's play that fun hypothetical. She has 3 advantages. And Rob actually would have an advantage because, again, they wouldn't be giving her the idol. They'd have to buy her all 3 advantages. Rob is still in the game in this scenario. I don't think people forget that Amber still has the potential benefit of Rob just because he's on Edge of Extinction. As I said, some of them already know that you buy things from people from Edge of Extinction because they have. Moreover, they'll just be worried that Rob is going to get back in the game later and they would vote her out. So she does not have a better chance of getting to the end. She probably has an equally poor chance.
Indeed. More importantly, because we did mention there is a later challenge to come back into the game, which in most seasons, I would be like, damn it. At the same time, looking at all the people that are on Edge of Extinction still, it's like, I don't know how adamantly opposed I am to a second challenge to come back into this game, given who's potentially coming back in. How are you feeling at this point?
I mean, look, it was it was always there. We've said it'd be better if it wasn't, but it is. And I said at the beginning of the season, it will be hilarious if Rob wins this game by coming back at the end. It will change nothing about any of the Rob dynamics and the arguments. They will live forever. But yeah, I kind of talked about this earlier. Is it better to win the mid challenge or the end challenge? Now, when I was thinking of that, it was because I thought you could keep your resources from the first half of the game. Now that I know that you can't, I mean, there's nothing saying that you can't try to win both. You might as well win the one you can, the one that's in front of you, because that, having 2 shots to come back in the game is better than waiting for only one.
Absolutely. But even given that, I think it probably does depend on who you are. But I think in this specific season, if you come in at that final challenge, say you were a pre-merge boot, say it's someone like Natalie or even Ethan, I think you have to do more than Chris Underwood did if you hope to win coming in at final 6. And I don't really know how much more you can do than what Chris did, because given how long he had to play, he did just about everything that was possible. But I don't know that if, Ethan or Danny or Natalie or Amber does that exact same thing. Do they win? I don't know that they do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing, of the worry, and I get it, it's a very legitimate worry that, 100% of the time that this has been done, the person who jumps into the end wins. I don't know how many of the people that Chris joined the game with that he would have beaten. As much as the advantage of being able to, bond with the jury in a non-competitive environment, that is a huge advantage. I'm not knocking it. As much of an advantage as it was that apparently the jury all got together and gave him the playbook in order to do it. We should note, he still had to do it, but and they gave him the intel that Victoria's the target. That in itself tells me that Victoria would have beaten Chris at the end. Rick Devens definitely would have beaten him at the end. Maybe somebody else that was there, maybe Lauren would have beaten him at the end, especially if she did something more with her idol than give it to Chris Underwood. He also had to get to the end against two people that weren't going to beat anybody. And, there are fewer of those people in this game. There certainly still are some. If Ethan comes in and goes against Adam and
Michele
or Nick.
Yeah.
I think Ethan would win, and I think maybe what would help an Ethan specifically is the fact that people want to give Ethan money due to, who he is and his personality and his story. If Danny came in, I don't think she's beating anybody, So I think you're right that it will depend on who is it and what they do, along with, the inherent advantage they have of being able to get along with the jury. I also wonder if the more competitive environment of Edge of Extinction, both from the players that are on it, thus these are more competitive people, but also the competitive nature of we're out here hunting for tokens and stuff, which there were a few hunts here or there, but not as much. If that will make people feel like their fellow jurors were also their competitors, and thus not just people that they were bonding with. I don't know if it will.
I think even if it does, I don't know that that's necessarily bad, because I think for a lot of those people, that's essentially you establishing your resume on Edge of Extinction. You're proving that you're better at that part of the game than they were, and maybe that shows them that you are deserving of their vote.
No, actually, I agree 100% with that. I actually kind of forgot that part that, so somebody, Adam will sit there and be like, they didn't even play the game. And is like, listen, you little pissant fucker. We nearly died going up and down a hill 20 times. What did you do? Oh, that's right. You were made fun of the entire time and nobody wanted to vote you out. So you're right. Actually, the tougher parts of Edge of Extinction actually is just making some people grow in estimation.
I'm going to go leave another negative review about this podcast. You called Adam a pissant fucker again. That is it. I'm going to take away right now.
I just love the turn of phrase. But the first time I said it, I wasn't planning on it. I'm like, that was great. Because it's also funny just applying it to that guy. I bet anybody who meets him be like, oh man, that's the nicest guy I ever met. Just funny. If you don't understand that most of what we do here is to amuse you and I, you don't get the vibe here.
All right, let's move on and talk about what we want from this season. Although I think the answer is more of this, right?
More of this. Just keep it going. Just run it back. So we saw in the preview that Nick, oh man, they didn't know who they were messing with. It's time to do this for real. I want to see him try. And for one, that fits my ethos. I want to see people try. But more, I want to see him try and fail. I want to see him be like, I'm going to buy so many beans. You guys don't even know. And people will be like, cause I worry that if he doesn't go out there, with revenge on his mind, doesn't really try, people be like, all right, we neutralize Nick. Now who can we get that's more important? No, I want him to really put it in people's eyes oh man, Nick is a threat. Let's get rid of him.
Nick came to play with nobody else. Got to get rid of that guy.
Yeah, because Michele will turn on him so hard.
Of course.
And again, bravo to her. She should.
We might knock Michele at times, but she's not so bad at math that she can't realize that 2 is less than 9. So yeah, she would immediately abandon ship. I think bigger picture, we got rid of Wendell. If we dump Nick and Adam at this point, that's all I need. Like, if those are the next 2 votes, then the odds of the season ending well are damn near 100%.
Yeah, no, then everybody else can kind of fight it out. I agree. I mean, there's still Michele and Ben.
But at the same time, like, that's...
No, let's not get greedy. I'm
yeah.
And Ben has been entertaining. Exactly. Like, he's a reactive fellow. I enjoy it enough. He's kind of a jerk, but I'm the last person to be able to complain about such a thing. So
right, let's not throw stones. Instead, if I were to get greedy, which I'm not, but let's just say, hypothetically, I were to get greedy.
You better be ready. It's coming for you.
I really want the new Black Widows thing with, like, Sophie, Denise, Kim, and Sarah.
Don't do it, man.
And then, like...
Don't do it.
Tony in a wig. Like...
No,
that's the new...
This is like...
Hang on. No, let this play out. Just picture it for these few glorious seconds. New Black Widow Alliance, you got Sophie, Denise, Kim, Sarah, Tony's in a wig. And then Parvati comes back at Final 6, and she's like, oh, I know this song! And they all get together, and they have to, of course, feast on their own, because you can only take so many people to Final Tribal Council. But at the same time, what a beautiful sight to behold that would be.
Okay, a couple things. One, Michele would absolutely be in that group, so there you have it. And 2, like, this is like the 8th season in a row that people, like, just want just a whiff of it, all it takes. And they set them up, like, oh, we're gonna get that women's alliance. Just don't do it to yourselves. Hope for the success of a woman, of a couple of women. Don't fall for the trap. It's just, I can't go there anymore. It never takes much, and frankly, I admire the optimism that keeps coming. They're like, I can feel it this time. Already people are like, I can feel it. We're gonna get a women winner, and we might. But it's like, are you you feel it in your bones? Do you feel it as much as last season when they kept telling us that I feel like this is the season we're gonna get a women's winner in the edit? No. Like, it just. Don't get yourself there. Don't jinx it. Just be for
the problem is we tasted that sweet, sweet nectar once. And so, 12, 13 years later, it's just, we're still jonesing for it. We want more. So Black Widow Part 2. Let's make it happen. Parvati 4.0, 7.0, whatever it is at this iteration. Let's make it happen.
5.2. There was just a few bug fixes that were in there.
Minor upgrades.
Yeah. So you jinxed it, by the way. That was you. Send your angry emails to @PurpleRockJohn on Twitter. You can send I never really thought of it that way. That was a great insight to @PurpleRockAndy.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of those, because if there's one thing I've found from doing this podcast for so long, it's that people are very quick to credit you when you accurately predicted these sorts of dynamics that took place on the show.
I mean, I'm sure there's nothing people love more than me being right. I mean, the extensive market research of the way it makes me feel has told me so.
All right. So speaking of which, you did hit on, we do have Twitters. You are @PurpleRockAndy. I'm @PurpleRockJohn. The show is @PurpleRockPod, where we live tweet each week. I specifically live tweet each week. You can find all of our show content on purplerockpodcast.com. You can comment during and after the episodes. You can do our fantasy games. You can see our 40 most influential player season, or 40 most influential player series, which is still going on. And this week,
we're halfway through.
This week did not doom anybody. Well played, 40 influentials. Well played.
And next week can't either, because it will not be winners next week. So there we go. We broke the streak. Also, Wendell wasn't going to be on that list. Spoiler alert. Yeah, so those are the different places. Again, Matt, I don't know why you'd be listening to this. So now that you are listening, I'm glad you're feeling better. Also, just a quick note. Really shitty timing, dude. Just the worst.
Really making the rest of us carry the load for you. Just, how inconsiderate.
What were he was supposed to write the next 2 posts. I'm just going to say. Who does this? Who has appendix problems in the middle of a pandemic? Like, totally selfish.
I see. You were concerned about his timing pandemic-wise. I'm more concerned about how it affects me.
All right. I think that's it for this week, huh?
Let's hit some theme music.
This one's for you, Wendell.
Hoorah, Fiji!
Feeling like a boss as a mile high. The buzz so real, it's like we bottle pop. Choppers on deck, their hearts flush when they drop it.
Straight calling dudes blunt when they body flopping.
Check the back from that blind side. They say the needy strong, but they change with the high tide. The dark side, the low V with the black dye.
The domino effect cost me $1 million in a small eye. Living a dream, I'm Ponderosa. Swung for the fences, I call it Sammy Sosa. We juice all day and toss the corks in the roasters.
Probes on deck feel the burn when he hosts ya.
Living a dream, I'm Ponderosa. Swung for the fences, I call it Sammy Sosa. We juice all day and toss the corks in the roasters.
Probes on deck feel the burn when he hosts ya.
Life is a beach as I sip my Corona. Survivor on my mind, that's why I Ponderosa. It will toast ya, maybe bloat ya,
Send you to tribal where they roast ya.
oh that dude might have ghosted ya.
Bottle service all day, we stay VIP. Serve the finest lobster like Seth on day 3. When things get hot, take a paddle to the sea. Unlock the door to freedom from my Florida key. On the jet ski, the vitamin D. What happens on the island stays in Fiji. Vanaka. Great take, guys. Nailed it.